Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, the great emancipator, the man who stood tall during the Civil War and led the nation through one of its most turbulent times. But what if everything you thought you knew about him wasn't the full picture? What if there's more to the story? In today's video, we're diving into the shocking truths about Abraham Lincoln that might just change the way you see him forever. Stick with me, because by the end, you'll have a whole new perspective on the man behind the legend. We all know the story, Honest Abe, the tall, gangly figure who grew up in a log cabin, became a self-taught lawyer, and led the country with a deep sense of moral integrity. This is the image we've all been taught, right? But here's the thing, this honest image might not be as clear-cut as we think. Yes, Lincoln is celebrated as a symbol of honesty, but that doesn't mean he was always forthright, especially when it came to his political ambitions. And honestly, we need to take a closer look at the bigger picture of how he rose to power. Lincoln's rise to the presidency was incredibly strategic, more calculated than many give him credit for. He was a master of political maneuvering, often willing to bend the truth or hide his full intentions if it meant gaining an advantage. Let's look at one of the most pivotal moments of his career, the 1860 election. During that election, Lincoln knew exactly what he was doing when he made promises to different factions. To the abolitionists, he pledged to curb slavery's spread, while to the more moderate groups, he promised to avoid directly interfering with slavery in the South. The reality? Lincoln didn't believe he had the power to end slavery in the South without a constitutional amendment, and that was a conversation for another day. So, when he made promises, he wasn't always being fully transparent with his audience. But Lincoln wasn't some two-faced politician out for power. He was trying to hold a fractured nation together, where every word he spoke had massive consequences. The Honest Abe myth? It's an idealized version of a man who, like all of us, sometimes did what he had to do to move things forward. Let's move on to another area where Lincoln's image doesn't always line up with the historical record: slavery. He is hailed as the man who freed the slaves, and yes, he did issue the Emancipation Proclamation. But here's the shocker: Lincoln's views on slavery weren't as clear-cut as we've been taught. In the years leading up to the Civil War, Lincoln was actually more focused on preserving the Union than on abolishing slavery. This is important because it changes the way we think about his motivations. He didn't wake up one day and say, "I'm going to end slavery today." It was more about saving the Union, and over time, he came to see that ending slavery was key to that goal. Lincoln was an incredibly pragmatic leader. Early on, he wasn't an outspoken abolitionist. In fact, he often spoke of limiting the expansion of slavery, rather than wiping it out altogether. It wasn't until the war intensified, and the abolition movement gained momentum, that Lincoln realized he needed to take action on slavery to keep the Union intact. Here's another interesting tidbit. Lincoln's personal stance on race was complicated too. Though he's often lauded as a hero for Black Americans, there were times when he was hesitant to extend full equality. One of the most controversial moments was when he considered sending freed slaves to colonize Central America, an idea he backed early in his presidency. It wasn't until later in his career that he started to embrace the idea of racial equality more fully. This shows us that Lincoln's views evolved. He wasn't the perfect abolitionist we imagine, but rather a man who, over time, recognized the moral and political necessity of ending slavery. His leadership was more about pragmatism and timing than about being the perfect moral beacon. Now let's shift gears and talk about Lincoln as a person, not just a president. We've all heard the heroic tales of Lincoln's stoic demeanor, but behind that image was a man who faced his own demons. Many historians agree that Lincoln likely struggled with depression, what we today would refer to as clinical depression. He often described feeling deep melancholy and suffered from bouts of emotional instability. At times, he would be so overcome with grief or despair that he found it difficult to engage with others. Even during the Civil War, when he was under the most intense pressure, Lincoln suffered deeply. He lost his young son, Willie, to illness, and the death weighed on him for the rest of his life. But here's where it gets surprising. Despite his personal battles, Lincoln's ability to carry on, to remain steady in the face of unimaginable hardship, is a testament to his inner strength. Let's move to that tragic moment, Lincoln's assassination. April 14, 1865, just days after General Lee's surrender, marking the official end of the Civil War. John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln in Ford's Theater. A horrific moment in American history. But what if there's more to the story than just a lone gunman's act of vengeance? First, we need to address something many people don't know. Lincoln was not the only target in Booth's plot. Originally, Booth had plans to kill not only Lincoln, but also Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward. His aim was to create chaos, to throw the government into disarray. But Lincoln was the only one who died that night. But here's the twist. There are theories that suggest Lincoln's death wasn't just the work of a lone actor with personal vendettas. Some believe that elements of the Northern government were involved in a conspiracy, either knowingly or through negligence. Lincoln's assassination came at a critical time, right after the war had ended. The idea that the North might have wanted a more malleable president after Lincoln's death isn't just a far-fetched theory. It's a part of the ongoing mystery surrounding his assassination. While there's no hard evidence to prove this, the timing of the assassination raises questions. Could there have been more at play than just Booth's hatred for Lincoln's policies? The idea that Lincoln's death could have been orchestrated for political gain remains one of the most debated aspects of his legacy. So what can we take away from all of this? The truth about Abraham Lincoln is that it's far more nuanced than the hero we often imagine. Yes, he was a visionary, a leader who ended slavery and kept the Union intact. But he was also a man with flaws. He wasn't perfect, and he didn't always have the moral clarity we associate with him today. Lincoln was a product of his time, and the decisions he made were often guided by pragmatism rather than idealism. He wasn't a saint. He was a politician doing the best he could with the resources and knowledge he had. And it's in his imperfections that we find the most relatable aspects of his character. In the end, perhaps the most shocking truth about Lincoln is this. He wasn't perfect, but that's what makes his story so powerful. His greatness comes not from being flawless, but from navigating an incredibly complex and turbulent time with resilience, vision, and humility. So what do you think? Did these surprising truths about Abraham Lincoln change the way you think about him? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss out on more deep dives into history's most intriguing figures. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.